challenges for your own daughters now? They're in their early 20s. Project your thoughts. You're now doing for them what you wish was done for you, maybe in somebody speaking to you in your 30s. How would you speak to them? What advice would you give them right now? That if, as you pass on, you die happy that they are on the right route.
Well, so, you know, we've enabled them to have, my wife and I have enabled them to, they're doing the degrees that they seem to enjoy, right? They seem to enjoy studying what they're studying, which is great. And what we're not going to do, what I would not do, would be overly protect my daughters, and because they have to find their own way in the world. Like, as much as it's tough to say it, you know, we're all on our own in this world. All of us are actually on our own. Nobody is going to actually save any of us, right? We've got to find our own way in life. And I do think my daughters, they have been galvanized. They're tough, right? They're tough because they've seen some of the stuff their dad's gone through. The other thing is, you know, by the age of 18, I traveled to one country, Spain. By the age of 18, my younger daughter Alice had been to 36 countries because we lived in Australia and we spent a lot of our money on travel rather than shiny possessions. And I do think that's really, really benefited them.
Enrich them, yeah.
Really enriched them. And they are much more open-minded, much more sexually open-minded and politically open-minded and environmentally than I had even any notion of when I was 18 or 20, right? So that's a positive thing. And I'm proud that we've done that for them. My concerns for them would be, I do think, and I don't want to get too political here, but I do think a lot of the capital and a lot of the positivity and a lot of the hope in the Western world has been sucked to the East. And I'm not criticizing the East, right? So China is the first country in the history of the world to be wealthy twice, right? It's having its second revolution now, right? So a lot of the economic axis is moving east into Asia. And so Europe and America is comparatively decaying compared to the East. So I don't think it's going to be, you and I lived, I think the heyday was, I think the 70s, 80s and 90s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s were really strong days in the West. And I don't think it's going to be as easy for our children to find, things aren't going to fall in their lap as quickly as they did for us. And so I think that's one concern. Social media is another concern. I also think if I'm losing my orientation around what's real news and what's fake news, I'd never heard of fake news until Trump came along. Then how confusing is the world for my daughters? And I guess finally, I listen to them, and you know, my wife and I own our own house. I've owned my own property. Well, I actually owned a property when I was 18 because I was just a feisty little individual with my brother, and I bought a studio in London, right? But I've owned a house for as far as I can remember. My daughters almost seem resigned to the fact that they're never going to get there, right? And there seems to be a bit of a sad resignation in this younger generation that, you know, we will never afford a house. We will probably never afford a car. And that's not that it's about possessions, but there does seem to be a resignation in them that I never felt. I always had a drive, right? And I don't know whether that resignation is manifesting in a comparative lack of drive. What do you think? Is it manifesting in that?
My argument is there's always going to be an owner, you know. So I mean, if they're renting, they're paying you rent, which is dead money to somebody else. I always remember in my 20s being at a session in a traditional pub one night, and I sat beside this guy, and he was asking me where I was living, and I was telling him where I was renting. And he said, "Yeah, that's the way to go. I mean, why would you be bothered owning a place and all that the responsibility of it, etc." And when I was leaving, I was chatting to another friend, and she says, "Oh, your man, he owns 60 houses, you know." I laughed. It proved my point. Everybody is doing something. I think there's nothing like owning your own space, owning your field, your space to do what you wish in it. And I think that's what our young need. And there's a certain grounding in it.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There's a rooting in it.
There's a rooting in it, absolutely. But I remember once reading, when I was in my studies in Trinity, about an analogy. They talked about the pockets of coloured people in the States who were like a rootless, dangling people, not knowing where they had come from and not
Yeah.
knowing where they were going. And
Yeah.
I use that analogy for our young,
Kind of.
en masse going
Yeah.
forward, unless they're gifted with parents who have grounded them.
That's
And
exactly what I think.
yeah,
That's exactly what I think.
yeah.